This week, it's dry everywhere. We'll give you the lowdown on spring planting during our Coffee Talk update. Ageless iron moving to the recycle heap. Is the price of scrap worth seeing the older tree row implements gone forever? New construction in Thief River Falls at Farmers Grain LLC and in Carrington at High Plains Equipment. And finally, what is the deal with those gas pump video screens? All this week on the Rural Reflections Podcast. Welcome to the Rural Reflections Podcast. You've got Dave Nelson in Carrington, North Dakota. He's Rural Reflections West, and Grant Nelson here at the studios of Thief River Falls Radio. I'm Rural Reflections East. And hello, Dave. How are you doing today?
Oh, doing pretty good. It's kind of nice morning to start out with. We were about 86 or 87 degrees here yesterday, and that was a little much for first real warm day, but it's supposed to be about the same again today, but it feels really nice right now.
So we've got really good weather for planting, but not really such great weather for growing right now. There's a lot of dry ground out there. Around here, we're already into beans. It's, this is May 2nd when we're recording this, and we're already well into beans around here. I think a lot of people have got their small grains in already, but we don't have a lot of moisture in the ground to get everything germinating. You don't see a lot of green up on top of the ground. How's it going out in North Dakota there, Dave, around the Carrington area?
Well, it's pretty similar, I would say. We're moved into the severe drought category now, I believe it is. It's we just turned completely red on the map for the whole county anyway. So it's about the same as what you're talking about. Small grains are planted. Some corn has been planted, but a lot of people stopped that to go plant some beans. And so beans have been going in pretty fast now this week. And there isn't anything much up. I've heard talk from some of the barley raisers that some of their barley is up, but that's in the same field where it isn't up. So it's just coming up where there's a little bit of moisture in a low spot or whatever. So they're concerned about what kind of a crop they're going to have because barley is a hard enough crop to harvest the way it is. And when you have 2 or 3 different stands of barley in the same field, that makes it all the more difficult. So.
This is the Coffee Talk portion of our show, the Rural Reflections Podcast. I was reminded that as I picked up a good, healthy draught of coffee. Now, a lot of people are putting in the crops because, of course, it's time to put in the crops, but they're putting it into pretty dry soil. 2 years ago, we were mudding it in. This year, we're putting it into some pretty dry ground and then hoping for moisture to come along and make all that germinate, Dave.
Yeah, we need to see some moisture to get it to grow. Most everybody is, they like planting when it's like this because it's not nearly as stressful to plant when you can cover the whole field. You don't have to turn off for wet spots and stuff like that or worry about getting stuck or getting pulled out or dug out, whatever it takes, So it's nice to plant, but there's a lot of apprehension about doing it because we just don't have any moisture right now to start anything with. So.
Well, it's dry all around. We're planting. It's like going, not knowing exactly where you're going. We're making fantastic time, but we're not sure when we're going to get there. But hopefully we'll get some moisture here in the very near future and move on. Dave, you're pretty near a major intersection there in Carrington, so you have an excellent opportunity to monitor what's going on in our area by what you see on the road. And recently you sent me a picture of a stack of what I guess the person who was driving the truck thought was scrap metal, but it was kind of a variety of stuff that you and I probably thought was more, historical artifacts almost.
Well, yeah, and a lot of it, things I've seen, before. There was a complete binder on there and potato planter, all kinds of old cultivators, I'm sure some horse-drawn, old planters, And it was a well stacked, real tight load, and then it had this old GM pickup on there, and the emblem on the hood is what caught my eye the most because it's just such a big emblem. Nowadays you don't hardly know what kind of a vehicle you're even looking at because they don't have the names so prominent on them and that kind of thing. But this one, big badge on the hood, said General Motors Company, or General Motors Trucks, I guess it was. And it caught my eye. It's we have a truck stop and a major intersection in the state, and I see all kinds of things coming. But when I see loads of scrap iron coming, I pretty well know that the price of scrap steel is up. And I'm sure a lot of people have heard about the price of steel in general right now. It's going up by leaps and bounds. And so I figure they're cleaning out tree rows again at a lot of places.
Yeah, I wonder almost as we move along in life if maybe the precious dishes in China and pink depression glass that used to be loved so much, which really doesn't have much of a market anymore. I wonder if some of the much older polling tillage equipment and other mounted equipment, that sort of thing, if maybe some of the value is going down because people are too young to remember it. Is that a possibility?
Oh, I think so. I think you see it in the collectors' items, the things that they really want now. We've moved up a couple of generations of tractors that people want to collect. It used to be if you could just get an old F20 or an F14 or something like that, Well, then it's moved into the other letter tractors, the H&Ms, and then the 100 series. Now it's a 1066 or even a 1086 if you want to have something cool as a collector.
I know I see that people talking about that, and I still think to myself, dang, that's a good tractor still for if you wanted to have a little loader tractor work for it or an auger or something like that. That would still be a decent tractor for that sort of thing, and people are starting to look at those as like a muscle tractor type of thing and seeing it more as a collector item. Yeah,
and it's, in certain areas of the country, they're very prominent yet in doing field work. There's a lot of places where you just can't have acreage like we have out here. It's just when you talk about certain places in southern Minnesota or Wisconsin, that kind of thing, 500 acres might be a lot. 500 acres here is a piece of ground you rented in the afternoon just to add to your 5,000.
Yeah.
So some of that stuff is still in a lot of demand and used a lot.
I'll tell you what, let's take a break. You've piqued my interest when we talk about some of the older items. We got to talk a little bit about new technology still yet before we send everybody on their way, and maybe changes and in certain companies. I've got one here in Thief River Falls that has merged together and is doing a lot of construction. We want to talk about what's going on in Carrington too, but we want to take a break first. This is the Rural Reflections Podcast. Welcome back to the Rural Reflections Podcast. Dave Nelson's out in Carrington. Grant Nelson's here in Thief River Falls. Dave, going to the gas station, the most irritating thing is no longer the price of gas.
Well, for me, it sure isn't, but I can't stand the little TV screen on the pumps. It just drives me crazy. And the timing of it, it doesn't come on when you're turning the pump on. It lets you get the nozzle in the hole, and then it jumps up on you by surprise with a loud, obnoxious news item or something that's of no value, just a bunch of noise.
It's like
I hate it.
now that we got you locked in, here's what you're going to be listening to for the next few minutes. I agree. When we were just talking about it off the air before we got back on, I'm like, oh yeah, that's exactly right. We can't be the only two people thinking about that. Now we've got something going on. Well, of course, we've got construction going on here in Thief River Falls for about the last, I don't know, 3.5, 4 years. It's been pretty thick. And something new going on right along 8th Street is Farmers Grain LLC, which used to be Farmers Co-op Grain and Seed. They're doing some new construction. They're going to do siding, which will include railroad siding up to the driveway for the golf club. That'll be a relief to everybody that it doesn't cross the driveway, but it just goes up to the driveway, so they're going to be able to do unit trains. And I spoke to Tom Guinan from Farmers Grain LLC last week, and I just wanted to let him tell us a little bit about what's going to be going on at the elevator up at 8th and Davis.
Well, I think the main thing is that, this will give us the ability to reach out to more producers. Certainly the folks that have been dealing with the co-op here are going to see the benefit of, being a current customer. But I think what we will naturally see from this is the folks that are east of us, Goodrich, and northeast of us at Grigla, that area, I think they're going to see more opportunity to bring grain to Thief River Falls instead of going around it or through it.
Now, Dave, out at High Plains Equipment, you've got some construction started out there, too. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, this was kind of a landmark week. Some of the construction trailers appeared out on our new building site, and they're getting started, at least with some of the preliminary things before we build a new facility. Our facility we've outgrown it by quite a bit, and we have separate buildings for parts and service, and we're going to put up a new 44,000 square foot building with parts and service and everything under one roof, which will be really nice.
Can you tell me a little bit about what drives the new building as far as scale? I mean, is it the size of the combine that makes up the sidewall? Is it the floor space? Is there a certain amount of floor space you're trying to make for each operation or each mechanic? Or are you trying to have it so there's certain services that are available at each station where they work on a tractor or a piece of equipment?
Well, it's kind of all of those, because part of our outgrowing of our old building is the height of the building, Yeah. So this building is going to be about 38 feet at the peak. The old building is about 22. And, a big part of that, of course, is so you can have overhead cranes and things like that in there. And the width of the building, of course, drives the height at the peak, and it's twice as wide. The building is, or the service department is twice as wide, and about another 30 feet longer. So it's a huge deal as far as space and floor space, because if you have to wait for parts, a service technician has to have more than one stall to operate out of. He can have 2 or 3 maybe. And then that way you can be pretty efficient in what you're doing, because if you run out of parts for one thing, then you go to the other one that you do have parts for. And of course, the size of stuff. This has got a 60-foot wide door. The old shop has a 36-foot wide door for the big door. So there's a lot of different things, but it's just to get the big machinery in and give the techs a little more freedom to have their own specific stalls to work out of and have a place so they can do 2 tractors or 3 tractors at one time.
You know, it seems like it's all about scale and efficiency. You just talked about it there with having one tech be able to do 3 jobs over at the same time while he's waiting for parts or something like that. In the case of Farmers Co-op Grain LLC, they're trying to get, well, they're not trying. They're going to have capacity for 130 car unit train so they can be a little bit more efficient. Something I wanted to dive into on the tech side this week, Dave, was mapping. With photogrammetry, with drones. I am right now in the middle of purchasing yet another drone. I think Lisa sometimes goes, "What is going on with this guy?" But you got to keep moving on as you have other tasks presented to you. You got to be able to have the tools to do them. So I picked up another drone this weekend, and what we're going to do with this one is be able to make 3D maps out of construction sites. And all this talk of construction going on, you know, it's really not as scary a concept as some people maybe come up with. I mean, essentially, you've worked with a lot of this sort of thing, Dave. I mean, basically what you're doing is taking enough pictures that overlap each other enough so that a really good computer program can stitch them together into one photo. Isn't that pretty much it?
That's exactly what we're doing, yes. Just take numerous pictures. You set the height you want to fly from. You set the width of the area you're covering with each pass in the field. And there is a limit on the number of photos you can take in a field. But it's pretty simple what they're doing, and just creating this very, very nice looking picture. You can zoom in, and I've looked at the maps, and I spotted a cat in the field after we started zooming in and looking at them. So
I'm sold on the idea. Then if you can spot anything as small as a cat, plus of course we both love cats. If you can spot that sounds like a pretty good software package and pretty good service also. One thing we should hit before we get done, I was thinking about mounted equipment. I picked up a little toy tractor, a 460 with a farmhand corn picker on it this week. I started thinking about all the mounted equipment that we haven't seen for, well, I think the last piece of mounted equipment I saw was probably, with any scale at all, was the New Holland 707 corn chopper on the side of our 180 LS Chalmers. But a lot of those old corn pickers and seeders and tillage and that sort of thing used to be mounted. And of course, a lot of that kind of started sauntering off to the great beyond, maybe with the advent of the 3-point. And then when you start getting larger equipment, even that, you couldn't put that on a 3-point anymore. It's just too large. But it kind of brings me back when I see those old corn pickers, you know?
Boy, there's a lot of them in storage in various places. You know, we don't maybe see it so much here because we didn't grow a lot of corn here when they were popular. But you get into, Illinois, Iowa, Indiana, that kind of thing. They're still pretty popular. People are looking for them. People that have small acreages just want to do that, run an old corn picker instead. And, I used to drive through Nebraska and areas and wonder what in the world they had these corn cribs for. And, most of it, I think, was ease of getting the corn. And then, of course, you had a little extra puts of cob in there when they were grinding or feeding the pigs or whatever they did with it. But people want to do that, to kind of a small scale, because a lot of people have a couple quarters of land or something like that, that or family land that they keep. And they want to still stay in touch with the land a little bit, and they know how to use that older equipment. And boy, there's practically bidding wars going on for mounted corn pickers now.
And that's something. I see some of the people who are collectors. That seems to be the new trend now, is to not just have your tractor, but you have to have the implement that goes with it. And a lot of times that's not just a trailing piece you can hook up, but a mounted piece of equipment, whether that is a seeder or if it's a corn picker like we're talking about, or tillage. That's a big part of creating the whole package that people want to share as far as their own personal history or that they remember from growing up on the farm. So, Dave, you got anything else for us this week?
No, I guess not. But this is going to be the week where the rain starts to come, I hope. So,
well, we won't hold you to that because we can't even hold meteorologists to it, but we'll definitely cross our fingers and hope. Thank you so much, Dave.
All right. See you, Grant.
See you later. There he is, my brother Dave, out in Carrington, North Dakota. I'm Grant Nelson here at the studios of Thief River Falls Radio, and this is the Rural Reflections Podcast.